Good to go.
Okay, great. Okay, can you see my slides? Good, great. Let me fix so I can see everybody. Okay, so hello, thank you for coming today. My name is Zach Breneman, and like Brad said, I'm going to be presenting on some preliminary research which was conducted during the field methods class, this year's field methods class. This study is an exploration into the stress and vowel length in the Micronesian language Woleaian. Can I do this? There we go. So just to give a quick overview of what we're going to be discussing today, we're going to begin with an introduction to the language and its home, followed by a short look at the language's genealogy. We will then have an introduction into the complex phonology system of Woleaian by going through the consonants, the different types of vowels, and then a bit about the stress system itself. After which I will present the research questions behind the study and the methodologies used. Then I will present a few ways to visualize the data and how we can understand it. And then finally, there will be a short overview going over the major points of interest. As stated earlier, Woleaian is a Micronesian language coming from the Federated States of Micronesia. The speakers of Woleaian originate in the Yap State, which is the outer southern islands of the Western Caroline Islands. This is made up about 78 total islands, and 22 of which are inhabited. Pointed out with these pink markers are the two island communities most of note, at least for this study, which are from the Woleai Atoll and the Yurupik Atoll. This is because the previous most substantial work and what we've been working with in field methods was done by Son 1975 in his grammar and his dictionary that came out in 1976. And that was done with speakers on the Woleai Atoll. As well, the language expert working on this year's field methods class, Lenny Somar, is from the Yurupik Atoll. So that's why those two are our focus here. So a quick overview of the language history. We see that Woleaian is a part of the Micronesian family and is a member of the Chugik subfamily. According to Son 1975, Woleaian has 6 dialects, and the Woleai dialect having 2 subdialects, which are split across the atoll. You see we have east and west. As well, we find that the Yurupik and Woleai dialects are very closely related in that they're split along with the Farorep dialects, all come with a shared point. In terms of population, according to the 2000 census, the Woleai Atoll had about 847 speakers, and the Yurupik had about 101. Also in the census, it was reported that the language was being used at home 100% of the time. These dialects have a high mutual intelligibility, with Son 1975 stating that the dialects only differ in their respective sounds and vocabulary, but not much in the grammar. Using this as a cue, we can now move to the phonology. So the most notable aspects of the consonant system are the labial release consonants, the proposed taps and gemination. The voiceless and voiced bilabial stop, as well as the bilabial nasal, all have the labial release, with only the voiceless bilabial stop having an unlabialized form. In the orthography, the letters R and L represent the alveolar tap and the retroflex tap respectively. But it's of note, however, that others in the field methods class will represent this either one or both as voiceless or at a close similar place of articulation, but most of them will all transcribe them as taps. Some of this voicelessness may be due to final word final voiceless vowels, which we're going to discuss later. In addition, Woleaian employs gemination. The geminated nasals have been reported in all word positions, and there are instances of the three voiceless stops also being geminated, either a word initially or medially. And although it hasn't been observed in this class, Son 1975 also argues for the presence of gemination in the bilabial and alveolar fricatives. So the vowel system, starting off with short vowels, contains 6 phonemes. Woleaian is a complex system of allophony with some overlap in the front vowel space from what we've seen in class. The orthographic E corresponds to the mid-high front vowel as the underlying form, with surface forms of the mid-high front vowel schwa and the mid-front vowel. The orthographic A corresponds to the low front vowel, and this will surface also as a low front vowel ash, and it also overlaps with the mid front vowel. The O in the orthography corresponds to the mid-back rounded vowel and surfaces as the mid-back rounded and the mid-low back unrounded vowel. The I in the orthography is the high front tense vowel in the underlying and surfaces as a high front tense and untense vowels. The U in the underlying, or the U in the orthography is the high back rounded vowel in the underlying, as well as in the surface, and also surfaces as the mid-high, mid-back, the mid-back rounded vowel, as we see here. Finally, the IU in the orthography, we believe it represents the high front rounded vowel. At least that's what my small group is arguing. As we're going to see in the next slide, Son also defines the graphemes EO and OA as long vowels, but what we've seen in our elicitation, I believe these are actually short, the short mid front rounded and the mid back unrounded vowels respectively. And we also see overlap here as well with the orthographic O. And yes, I have some theories of what's happening there, but there's going to be more work needed for anything. Moving now to long vowels. Woleaian has both phonemically long and short vowels and follow the same distribution we saw in the short vowels. Here in the orthography, the letter is doubled to signify the long vowel. Also written as IU in the orthography. The front high rounded vowel also has a long form. And as mentioned previously, the OA combination in the orthography corresponds to the mid-back rounded vowel. Though it has been observed that the long O in the orthography can also have this surface form, though only in this form have we seen it in the long, phonemically long. Further, the high front rounded and mid-back unrounded vowel has only been observed in elicitation in their long forms when it serves as the only vowel of the syllable and there isn't a coda. So there's some interesting environments happening. Finally, Woleaian has word final voiceless vowels. Son proposes the 5 shown in the table here, though I adapted them into the IPA just for readability. In the Europic dialect, however, the word final vowel in the orthography will often be the orthographic E instead of whatever vowel Son proposes in his grammar or dictionary. This isn't always the case. This is a frequent but still rare. As well, this difference comes through in speech. This could be just dialectal differences or perhaps a larger front shifting. This is just speculative. Furthermore, these voiceless vowels can at times become voiced when followed by another word, which is typically a modifier. And I believe that's all we've ever seen in the elicitations as well. These word final vowels also are able to cause change to the preceding vowels. So we see here with the U and the O, this causes a rounding onto whatever the preceding vowel, whatever vowel preceding is there. Now having seen an outline of the phonology, we can look to the stress system. Sun doesn't mention stress at any point in his grammar, but does write a bit on pitch and intonation contours. And in that section, he states this quote, intensity is not particularly significant because all vowels are pronounced with equal intensity in general. Sun doesn't mention how he came to this conclusion, but it is an interesting statement to consider for future work, especially considering this study. I've observed stress only in the penultimate syllable, as we see in these examples, with the stress marker remaining on the penultimate syllable in all multisyllabic words. Though it should be noted that others in the class have stated that they observe stress on the initial syllable in some words with 3 syllables. It's going to take more work to really suss out what's happening there or what's happening there. But this is not going to play a role in this study because all of the words used here are going to be disyllabic, so only 2 syllables. With that said, I can turn now to research questions behind this study. So the goals here is to begin the exploration of the relationship between word level stress, phonemic vowel length, and acoustic vowel duration in Woleaian, specifically the Europic dialect. As this is still quite broad, I break this down into the following questions. Are there differences in the phonemically long vowels when either the penultimate stress syllable or the final stress syllable? As well, are there differences in phonemically short vowels when either in the penultimate or final syllable? And these methodologies that I used. My methodologies for the study were that there was one speaker, Lenny Solmar, who gave his consent to be recorded, archived, and identified. He is the language expert for the field methods class. Due to the current restrictions, this was recorded outside on a cardioid condenser mic with Marantz PMD 561 recorder. There were a total of 5 test vowels. This study used disyllabic words as candidates. I avoided geminate consonants due to possible influences on the vowel duration. All words that were used were also proposed by Son 1975 to have open syllables. At first, these words were found looking through old elicitations and was then supplemented by looking through the dictionary Son 1976 whenever a candidate couldn't be found. All of which were confirmed to be words by Lenny. These words made up a paradigm of the different combinations of long and short vowels in either the 2 syllables. And this was done for each of the vowels. I have one example paradigm here of the mid-high front vowel. We see that the orthography shows the long-short candidate zer as a closed monosyllable, though Son states that in actuality it has a final vowel underlying. Not in so many words, because Son's grammar was somewhere in between a pedagogical grammar and a grammar geared towards linguists. So this is how I interpreted this. And I adapted it into the IPA here. After finishing this paradigm, a carrier phrase was chosen. This was so that the study can avoid phrasal contour influences as much as possible by keeping the candidate word sentenced medially. This was then built into a list of test sentences and recorded. This was repeated 2 more times with the lists being randomized each time for a total of 3 recordings. Before the first recording, I explained listen to intonation and why this can cause issues, and asked Lenny to avoid it if it was possible. This wasn't repeated for any subsequent recordings. Yes, and then measurements were made in prot and then plotted in R. Now we can move to what we find. This is the phonemically long vowels, different durations when in either the penultimate or final syllable. We see that they are actually relatively equal in duration, regardless of what syllable they're in, though it should be noted that there are several outliers in the final syllable, which are all longer than the majority of the penultimate syllable. As well, we have these outliers for the penult. Likewise, in the phonemically short vowels, we see clear overlapping duration measurements, though in this case, we are seeing a large variation in these short vowels in the final syllable. Yeah. So just some quick takeaways from just that are that when comparing phonemically long vowels in the penultimate and final syllable of the duration of these vowels are relatively similar. As well, we're seeing something similar with the phonemically short vowels. There's relatively little difference in duration between the two syllable types, keeping in mind that in this data at least, there is far more variability in the final syllable. Now, being that this study is an exploration into Woleai stress and vowel length, I now would like to try and look at this data from a different perspective. And that's what we have here. I added this line on the 0, 0 just for readability, as it'll help out. So this figure shows us the difference of the penultimate vowel's duration minus the duration of the vowel in the final syllable. This meaning that taking whatever duration of the vowel in the initial syllable, or the penultimate rather, and then subtracting the duration of the final syllable, we come to these measurements. This difference shows us that for any word type, any positive value here tells us that the word's penultimate vowel is longer in duration than the final. So looking at the long-short word type, we could expect, this is just an example, we could expect that a short vowel's duration subtracted from the long vowel's duration to result in a positive value. We would expect this. And due to this fact, this figure suggests that words with syllables of the same phonemic length can have longer penultimate vowel durations, at least in this study alone. However, we need to note the small distribution of the short word types in the negative values, its outliers, and as well the outliers of the long words, which we have here and here on both sides. And we're going to kind of see what's happening with those in the next slide as well. So this figure shows all of the tokens for their respective word types in the paradigm, though we can go a little bit further and look at each vowel separately. And that's what we've done here. So this is a big mix of box plots. It's a little daunting to look at, but this figure shows the difference of vowel duration for each token in the study. And this is now being separated by vowel type. So the exact same values as the last slide, but now separated by vowel. As we see, looking at the long forms in each of these vowels, we only see the vowel U have any negative values. And that's what we're seeing here. So if we look at any other long forms, we don't have any other negative values. Likewise, in these short forms, we only see the E with the having negative values. Interestingly, these two vowels and their variability is accounting for the outliers that we were seeing in the previous slides. And this variability is very of note as well. So some takeaways just from those two slides. When looking at the difference in duration between the penultimate and final syllable, words with syllables of the same type seem to trend towards having a longer duration in the penultimate vowel. However, we saw that there were some outliers that go against this, and those outliers were the E in the short word type and the U in the long word type. As well, these were the two vowels with the most variability in this data. So that's the representations that I have, as well some future directions that I think this could go and what I kind of want to think about in the future. Some ways that I would like to improve this study. Obviously, having more speakers would be a benefit. As well, having more candidate words is going to be a benefit. I have extra words already, but I didn't have enough to fill an entire paradigm proportionally. So I didn't want to overcomplicate it. Plus, taking more time out of the actual field methods class is not always good. I had issues with a few words not having final vowels, mostly in the short final vowels. And that's despite even the proposed final vowels of son and what we would expect seeing the orthography. As well, there were instances where a vowel would surface in 2 of the 3 recordings, but not in the last one or one of the others. So there needs to be more work to figure out what's happening there, what may be a cause, or what might be limiting what can surface. This added a little bit issue in how we could visualize the data. I'd also like to look at other possible correlates of stress in addition to duration. So for instance, F0 intensity or taking a closer look at the formants itself would all be interesting additions to the study. As well, one final thought, which I've really been considering while working through this study, especially working with final vowels, I'd like to look more into whether these voices vowels are serving as the nuclei of syllables. I'm curious what kind of syllabicity they actually have, or how we can account for them dropping at times, how we can account for them being voiced at times. I think that's something that needs more exploration. And finally, an overview. There seems to be relatively little change of either a phonemically long or short vowel when in either the penultimate or final syllable. However, in terms of difference in duration between the vowel of the penultimate and the vowel of the final syllable, there does seem to be possible lengthening in the penultimate in words with short, short, or long, long forms. So same syllable types. Though we need to account for the outliers that were mentioned. And here is my references. Finally, thanks for coming. Thank you for listening to my presentation on stress in Woleaian.
Great, so now we can open up the floor for questions. Anybody have any questions, Zach?
You see me here?
Yes, go ahead, Bob.
Okay, so yeah, it's a really nice presentation. I think you're really well organized and the presentation is very clear. I like the way you handled this. One of the future directions, one of the things you'd like for future directions is to find more speakers. And when I think about an atoll, a single atoll on which this language is spoken by 101 people, I wonder how good your chances are.
That's very fair. Yes, I think even looking at the different dialects would be interesting. For one to see if there's diachronic differences that are happening, or if it's dialectical. So seeing that difference would be very interesting as well. I understand what you're saying. I think maybe even instead of just blanket term more speakers, just more instances, more recordings. And so we can kind of balance out this wide variability if that's even possible through that method.
Okay, just one other.
But Lenny does have two cousins at least here, and he's mentioned more people. They're not all from Irpik. Some are from Woleai Atoll, but you know, I think it's still potential to look at both atolls.
Yeah. One other small point, and that is, it's always hard to know how to pronounce someone's name if you haven't heard it from the person or the people who work with the person. But it's Son, not Son or Son.
Oh,
rather.
my mistake.
Son. He was a classmate of mine, and you know, I kind of grew up with him in the same department, and so everybody called him, you know, Homeman Son. Son.
Oh.
So please correct that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I have another question. So in Sohn's grammar, thank you, Bob. In Sohn's grammar, I think he mentioned at some point possible compensatory lengthening for like in order to account for like a minimal word. Like a minimal word had to have either two short vowels that were both voiced or one long voiced vowel. Do you see any reflections of that in your results?
Can you repeat that again? So he said for the minimal word, it requires two short vowels.
Yes, so either I could be misremembering this, but I believe it was two short vowels with like one in the penultimate and one in the ultimate syllable, and with both being voiced, or one long vowel in the penultimate and one short but voiceless vowel in the ultimate.
So we do have one word that I can think of that was in this paradigm, and that was kut with a short mid vowel or short penultimate vowel, and there wasn't a vowel surfacing for this word as an example. So that's one example. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
thank you.
it's interesting though. And I have seen also with even the long vowel with a voiceless. I've seen long vowels surface with like long vowels in the penultimate and no final vowel, voiceless or not. So it's something's happening there.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's actually a question you could potentially answer with a bit more data, right? To compare the length of those vowels where the final vowel doesn't surface or is voiceless, right? So we would expect that there would be some sort of compensatory lengthening in those cases to meet some sort of word minimality constraint.
Yeah, that would be that's a good other direction as well. So many places you can take this.
Yeah.
Well, great. Does anybody have any more questions? Brad?
Yeah, I have one quick one that just came to me. We've talked about this a bunch of times, Zach. So but I'm curious. So the two vowels where you found the outliers, those were the orthographic E, correct?
In the last,
Yeah.
that was the orthographic E and the orthographic U.
Okay. So you, I wonder if that orthographic E, the one thing I've seen with reading the phonologies of different students in the class is that this orthographic E represents so many different types of vowels. And so do you think that's an issue of potentially different vowel qualities, so that it's anything from a schwa to a, you know, a lax mid vowel sort of?
I do. I think even when I was starting this part, starting the actual paradigm building, I was a little bit worried about how the E's were going to surface. All of them are at least proposed by Son as E, and they're spelled by Lenny as E. And I don't know if it's allophony or what may be causing that. But yeah, that's one of the other reasons why I want to include formant, looking at formants when
Yeah.
looking at correlates of stress, because that may have something to do with it. Just very overlooked as I was going through the waveforms in Prot. I was noticing that there was some vowel changes, sometimes slight, sometimes a little bit more. E was kind of all over the place, as you're saying. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so that, yeah, I think that's definitely something to look forward to. Okay, that's it for me.
Any other questions? Seems like not. So join me in thanking Zach again. Thank you again for speaking at the Austronesian Circle. And thank you everybody for making the Austronesian Circle possible this semester. We'll continue next semester, and you'll see in your emails as we get things planned out. But thank you again.
Thanks for coming.